Recently, there's been a rise in voices, including YouTubers like Rob the Polygamy Guy, who are pushing the idea that polygamy is not only acceptable for Christian men, but even encouraged. In his video titled 5 Reasons Why Christian Men Should Pursue Polygamy, is full of misleading and dangerous doctrine. And today we're going to break down why this belief is false and why it's a danger to your dating and relationship life as a Christian. We'll also hear from famous YouTubers such as Mike Winger, Tim Ross, and Ruslan as they weigh in on this topic of polygamy as well. But first, let's look at why polygamy seems to be so popular. So I saw that just within the past year, there's been a huge uptick in polygamy and just it being a topic of conversation among believers. Now, normally when you think about polygamy, you think about Andrew Tate and others like him that are part of the Red Pill community where they show polygamy in high regard.
So if I sit and say I have 5 wives, or 10 wives, or 1 wife, or no wife, I like that the Matrix doesn't completely understand why I have. That's one of the main reasons I do it. The second thing is this. I sat there with a reporter from the Telegraph who said that, why would you have 5 wives? If you cheat on them, they're unhappy. And I said, my friend, who are you to tell women how they feel and what decisions they want to make? How insulting of you. How chauvinistic are you to sit and say that women do not have the independent thought to decide? I think at a certain status of man, the idea of absolute exclusivity and absolute loyalty becomes less important to the female because of his other accolades. That's a fact. Every king, every sultan, read the Bible. If a female decides she wants to be with me, assuming that's what I even do, I could be Mr. Monogamous for anyone, right? Assuming that's what I do, that's her imperative. She's an adult. She can sit there and go, okay, my man's the big boss. He's with me 99% of the time, but I know if he goes to Moscow on a business trip, he's doing X. But he comes home to me, and I'm driving a Bentley, and I'm happy.
It wasn't until I started scrolling on my news feed when I recently just saw a video by Mike Winger where he critiques a Christian guy by the name of Rob on his views on polygamy and why he thinks it's a good thing for Christian men to be a part of. So me being curious, I clicked on the video and I was shocked at what I saw.
The polygamy crowd usually has a definition of adultery that says adultery just means a woman cheating on a man. A man can't even commit adultery. Jesus himself proves this wrong when he says, in this scenario, a man commits adultery. There's lots of other verses on this in the New Testament. There's other stuff in the early church. Like Paul says, like if you have more than one wife, if you're not the husband of one wife, you can't even be in leadership. And you could try to reinterpret this, but this absolutely refutes polygamy. You can't even be a church leader if you've committed polygamy.
After watching Mike Winger literally just demolish each and every point that Rob was trying to make about polygamy, I then got my wife Brianna and we both watched the video together. And that's when we decided, oh, we got to talk about this. Hey everyone, my name is James, and my wife and I, we make videos on our channel, Meaningful Monogamy, about Christian dating, singles, relationships, and marriage. And on this channel, we stand by what the scriptures say, and that God is the one that brings meaning into marriage. So if you've been rocking with us for a while, please give the video a like, a share, and subscribe to the channel for more Meaningful Monogamy videos like this one. All right, let's get into it.
It's your boy, Rob Kowalski, quickly becoming known as the Christian Polygamy Guy, back with another video, and this video is entitled 5 Reasons Why Christian Men Should Pursue Polygamy. Yep, this is going to be a doozy, so stay with me. All right, before we get into it, I need to tell you that I am a committed Christian. I am a Jesus follower. My life is completely surrendered to him, and I would not do anything that I didn't believe that God was okay with. To all my
Okay. So first, I don't want to question his salvation or anything, because we don't know the guy.
We don't.
But I will say that there is something inherently wrong when you put Christian and polygamy in the same sentence in both, and because we already know that Jesus straight up, threw that out the window right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So already off the bat to say that you're a follower of Christ, and Christ was the one himself says that, that he would rather it be back how it was in the beginning with Adam and Eve, and there was no polygamy. You already got me confused.
Yeah, I think too. It's not at the end of the day, it's not a question of salvation. I think that this is just a reminder of how easy it is to allow our carnality, to allow the things that tempt us, and to allow other doctrines to infiltrate what we have been given, because we've been given a gospel. The gospel is a gift. And sometimes we take that gift and we allow this world to pollute it. And that's where what we call the doctrine of demons comes from. Or that's where false teaching comes from, is when we allow the world or our worldly desires or carnalities to infiltrate the gift of the gospel that we've been given.
Yeah. So we're in for a ride. Here we go.
My fellow Christians out there, let me just tell you this. The Bible has no ban on polygyny. Now, I'm going to be using the term polygyny and not polygamy because polygyny is the technical term for a man having multiple wives.
Okay. So I'm sorry, we might be pausing a lot through this, and we're going to try and keep this within 25 minutes. The Bible does speak about polygamy, and whenever it does, it's never in a good light. Whenever it comes up, there's always problems.
Yeah, but then I think my main thing that I'm going to constantly go back to, and it's something that biblical scholars use a lot, or people who've been to seminary, I'm not one of them, I want to go one day. But when people say the law of first mention.
Right.
When you look at the first marriage.
Mention, yep, the first marriage.
It was a man.
And a woman.
And a woman. One man.
It was
and
Adam
one woman.
and Eve, not Adam and Eve and Janine.
And Steve.
Or
and
Adam
Cordell,
and Eve and Steve.
And
you know, however they want to do it. It was just one man, one woman.
Yeah.
So whenever it's brought up in the scripture, looking at King David, looking at Solomon, looking at Abraham, looking at Jacob, these were all examples where there were always problems.
Yeah. When more than one woman was brought into, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
All right, let's keep going.
But seriously, take a moment to think about that. The Bible explicitly forbids all kinds of things and has punishments for each infraction, but polygyny ain't one of them. No punishments, no condemnation, not even a negative word about it, nada. So let's put to rest this idea that it was some Old Testament thing that God just allowed because of war or wanting to populate the earth thing.
Okay, you got that Bible handy?
Yeah.
We got to open that thing.
Okay.
This got to be okay. How many minutes we have? Okay. Keep that thing handy because whenever he pull out some wild stuff, we got to debunk it. So as Rob was breaking down each of his points on how Christian men should pursue polygamy, my wife and I had a rebuttal for each one.
Can you really say that in doing this thing you have total peace from God?
And that you're pleasing Christ. This pleases
true.
Christ.
It's true. Because at the end of the day, the chief end of mankind is to know God and to glorify him forever. So does this help you to know God more? And does this bring him glory, or is it bringing you glory?
False teaching, when you receive false teaching and you don't dismiss it or you don't correct it, then what it does is that it takes over your whole being in the decision making and the things that you do. Just like how right teaching can garner a person's way of life. Mm-hmm. Wrong teaching can do the same thing too. Yeah. Even down to, this channel is about singles and about dating and marriage and how to and relationships and how to do things God's way. It can even affect how you date and how you move within your marriage, move within your relationship. So just straight up, this is false, straight false, and we'll start breaking down the reasons why.
The whole house of Israel, our spiritual ancestors, came from a man with 4 wives. And let's also be real with ourselves. The divorce rate, even amongst Christians, is sky high, up to 50%. So don't tell me that monogamy is some magic fix. It's time to rethink our approach.
So first off, whenever you hear people say things like, divorce rate is up, divorce rate is this, divorce rate is that, a lot of those numbers are skewed and a lot of those numbers are false positives, because at the same time, there's also numbers that say two-thirds out of all marriages that stick it out. Yep. After the bump in the road that stick it out, they stay together and they stay married longer. Than those that, whenever problems or issues come or what they call it, irreconcilable differences come, that's when they split. But 2/3 that make it past that, they end up having long, healthy, happy marriages.
Also, we watched a video where a guy really broke down what those statistics will look like. And it's like, you got to think about, there are so many different situations that could come about. And I feel like we should, maybe
play that video
play that video.
Everywhere you read or listen, you'll hear it said, almost half of all marriages end in divorce. Does that mean that the future of your marriage is a coin toss? In this video, we want to offer 3 warnings about this divorce research. The first warning, the 50% figure makes it sound like half of everybody married right now will get divorced. This is not the case. That figure is an estimate of the likelihood that couples marrying this year will end their marriage by divorce at some point in the future. But if you're not a newlywed, the 50% odds don't apply to you. In fact, the longer you're married, the less likely you are to get divorced. The second warning, even among newly marrying couples, few couples actually fit the 50% risk. Who you are is a more reliable indicator of your divorce risk. If you have a college degree, got married in your late 20s or early 30s, and grew up with married parents, your odds of divorce may be as low as 20%, even lower if you've been married for 10 years or more. But if you dropped out of high school, married young, and came from a divorced family, well, your risk is a lot higher than 50%. But these are just averages. Lots of couples succeed despite bad odds if they are determined to stay emotionally connected and work through their problems. They resist falling into the number one reason people give for their divorce in our research, growing apart. The third warning. The assumption in most studies of divorce is that when the divorce papers are finally filed, both people are ready to move on. But both spouses rarely want a divorce. It takes 2 people to get married, but just 1 person to end the marriage. The bottom line, if you want to avoid divorce, if your spouse says they are not happy, take them seriously now before their unhappiness leads them to seriously consider divorce. If you're the unhappy one, help your spouse know that you are not just in a bad mood, but need serious changes in your marriage. Every marriage has challenges, but if commitment to the marriage is at stake, it's an emergency that, if addressed well, can lead to a healthier, happier marriage, even when there have been serious problems.
But it didn't stop there. I then began to see on my news feed on Instagram that Tim Ross also did a video where he talked about someone who was involved in polygamy. Here's what he had to say about it.
I had a dude that came when I was a young adult pastor. He came in with his wife. His wife is the one that set up the meeting. She was like, "You got to tell my husband something." So, long story short, the dude wanted to also marry his wife's best friend. He was already married to his wife. He wanted to marry his wife's best friend. Let me drink some of my water. He sits down, he starts going through the Old Testament, and he's like, Jacob had 4 wives, and David had a bunch of wives, and Solomon had a bunch of wives, and God blessed them. And so I'm just saying I'm in love with the best friend too. And so I don't understand what the big deal is. I was like, so your biblical argument for polygamy is Jacob had more than 1 wife and David and he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right, cool. I said, do you believe Ephesians 5? He was like, yeah, I believe Ephesians 5. I was like, well, let's read it together. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, right? Cool. And then by the end of it, it talks about, Paul says that this is a mystery. The mystery of marriage is Christ's love for his bride. Like, this is the way that it is revealed. Marriage actually is a type and shadow of the way Christ loves his bride, which is the church. He's like, got it. I said, so if you marry your wife and her best friend, is this still a picture of Christ and his love for the bride? He's like, yeah. I said, then who is Jesus' second wife? The church is the first. If your marriage is going to be a type and shadow of Christ and his love for the bride, who is Jesus' second wife? Is it Islam? Is it Buddhism? Is it Hinduism? Who's the second bride? I'm just trying to figure out, since he got more than 1.
Now, here's the thing. The Bible is very clear about the difference between polygamy and a traditional monogamous marriage. Let's start with the foundation. The Bible is clear that God's design for marriage is 1 man and 1 woman. That's outlined in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. So my wife and I then began to talk about, why is it that polygamy seems to be a hot topic amongst men in this day and age?
Let's be real. It is every man's dream.
Oh, yeah,
what
of
he's
course,
talking about.
Of course.
So when you look at Solomon and David and all of them, and I was reading through the Bible, and I did notice a transition, because if you look at the New Testament, you don't see it. You know, you just see man and woman. And it kind of had me thinking, because like at the end of the day, we had to get back to what we were made for. Like, if it really worked, it would have continued. I'm gonna just say that.
Yeah.
If it really was the solution.
If it was
and if it really
effective, right?
was effective and God's will and all these things, it would have continued.
It wasn't until we began to look more into Rob, the Christian Polygamy Guy's video, that we began to see a pattern.
Reason number 2, supporting and protecting women. Right now, there's a major imbalance in the numbers game when it comes to marriageable women to men. Just in the United States church alone, there are 20 million more women than there are men. That's a whole lot of ladies who need a covering and they need someone to look out for them. But what do we do?
You know, okay.
No, real quick. Because he said it's 20, however many more women in the church than there's men. So you mean to tell me, earlier you said a virtuous woman.
That there wasn't many to find them. Yeah, it was scarcity of them.
And I know that every woman that's in church ain't, you know what I'm saying. But
and then some of them aren't looking for marriage too.
True, but there's a high percentage of those women that are virtuous.
Yeah.
And so your number 2 is kind of coming
contradiction.
You're contradicting yourself, and that's a sign of false teaching.
Yeah.
When it's hard to not contradict, it's probably a false teaching.
Ultimately, we can be led astray as Christians if we aren't closely connected to Christ and what he teaches from the word. Jesus himself gives us the clarification of what his stance is on marriage, in which he created, in Matthew chapter 19, verse 4-6, where he says, "Haven't you read," he replied, "that he who created them in the beginning made them male and female? And he also said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate." Even within that text right there, Jesus is saying that in the beginning, it was one man, one woman, not one man and 5 women. Ruslan also gave his take on this same video. And here's what he had to say concerning polygamy.
I mean, listen, Jesus said, for this man, a man will leave his father and mother, marry his wife, become one in flesh. I think Jesus is prescribing.
Become 3 in flesh.
No. You see Paul saying one woman man married of one wife. So you see this all throughout the New Testament.
All right, y'all. This was good. Appreciate this, Bree. Now y'all go out there and make today meaningful.